I'm Alison Lomax and I'm Head of Brand Solutions at Google. So I joined Google just over 4 years ago, and coming from advertising agencies, particularly my last role was working for a creative agency. It was quite male dominated at the most senior levels, and there wasn't much conversation in the office about diversity. And when I joined Google, I sat next to the chair of Women at Google. And so she was telling me about all the fantastic initiatives and projects that they were doing, and wanted to get me involved. And I have to say, initially, I was a bit worried that it was going to be some bra-burning feminist organisation, and couldn't have been further from the truth. And actually, Women at Google was set up by Cheryl Sandberg, Marissa Mayer, and Eileen Norton, who is the country manager of UK and Ireland. And the reason it was set up was really to help create conditions for women to thrive at Google. And there are three main focus areas of doing that. There is development, there's connections, and there's community. So for each of those areas, there are lots of different projects that we do and events that we put on. And the area that I was particularly drawn to was the development side of things. So for years, I led the Women at Google development for the UK, which has been immensely satisfying. So we launched a course called Stretch, which is for levels 4 and 5, and it's facilitated by female senior Googlers as well, which is great because it's a brilliant way for us to be able to understand the challenges that women are facing, and also to build a network for everyone within that room. And so what we talk about is the gender diversity, the challenges that we face and what some of them might be. So we talk quite a lot about the McKinsey study that identifies 4 main challenges for women in the workplace, which are the structural barriers, the institutional mindsets, the individual mindsets, and then lifestyle choices as well. We then talk a lot about consciousness and intent, and being much more intentional about your own career and really claiming your space. And then we talk a lot about leadership presence and how you can dial up your own leadership presence and some techniques for doing that. And then it closes with, we call it Keep Stretching, which is about what are the activities and tactics that you can do, whether it's seeking sponsorship or it's looking for stretch opportunities or networking. So there's a very practical element as well as the theoretical and the intellectual side of it. And ultimately, the reason that we are so passionate about diversity at Google, it's not the altruistic side. It's ultimately better for business, and we've all seen the facts and figures that demonstrate that more diverse leadership teams generate and produce better business results, and that's fundamentally why we want to do it. Stretch has been an incredible initiative that we launched at Google, and it's one that's now global. So Stretch courses are running all over the world, and it's become more than a course. It's turned into a movement, and there's so much communication between the women who've carried out courses and a real sense of support and encouragement between the cohorts that I've run. So it's been, for me, one of the most rewarding things that I've done since I've been at Google. But it's not just about women, and my challenge was always around, are we just fixing the women? And really, this is so much broader than that. And for companies to succeed, there's got to be a really inclusive culture, and it's all about inclusive leadership. So actually, a colleague and I spun off a separate course, which we call Stretch for Inclusive Leaders, which was basically a cut down of Stretch. And it was a debrief, but also getting them to do some of the exercises that we do. So it's only a 3-hour course as opposed to 2 half days. And we piloted it with the UK management team. And with such a success, it's now rolling out globally as well. So all the Stretch facilitators can run this course as well. And what was fantastic about it was that it involved men in that conversation. And I think the real danger for businesses are if men feel excluded, and they feel like there's this movement going on which they're not part of, but they feel alienated and actually sometimes threatened by it as well. So it's really important for businesses to approach it in a very inclusive way, and for leaders to recognise and understand how they should be behaving and what they should be doing differently. In the McKinsey study, one of the barriers for women in the workplace was individual mindsets. And certainly that was something that I really related to when I read the study. And there's a whole thing about how women opt out before they opt in, which is certainly in my experience what I did. And the story that I'll tell you is when I was in my late 20s, I was offered a promotion. I just got engaged. I was planning on getting married a year later. I was hoping to have children at some stage after that. And I turned down the job because I didn't want to mess the company around because I was planning to have children in the next couple of years. And also I had that slight worry about how I couldn't necessarily do all the attributes on the job spec, which is quite typical of women. And there was a study that I read that said women will only go for a job if they can do 100% of all the job attributes, whereas men would go for it if they could do 60. And when I look back at that time, I think I wish Lean In had been out then, because this is all the material that Sheryl Sandberg talks about. And if someone at that moment had said Lean In Lomax, I would have taken the job. Whereas I had no role models or I had no colleagues who could really coach me through that time. And so I ended up turning down the promotion. So my advice to all women now is don't put off an opportunity and lean in until the moment, if you are going to have children, that you go on maternity leave, and don't close any doors beforehand. Because I look back at that decision and regret it. So the year where women return back to work is absolutely critical, which will determine whether or not they'll stay in the workplace or not. And so what we recognised is, and what we're piloting is maternity coaching before, during and after maternity leave. And that's for the individuals themselves, but it's also for their managers, because what we found was that how it was dealt with was very much dependent on the individual manager, who hadn't necessarily had all the training or knew how to support in the right way. So for them to receive coaching as well, it means that they're getting the right input and advice at the right stages, as well as the maternity leaver and returner as well. And more companies are looking at maternity coaching to really help that window, which is a short window. And I remember hearing Carolyn McCall talking a couple of years ago at a conference, and she said there's a very small window in women's life where they need a little bit of help. And that's all it is. It's providing a little bit of extra support at that really critical time to really help ensure that women stay in the workplace. And what we're also doing is we'll look at it for paternity, because we're exploring it for maternity now. But as more and more men take paternity leave, it will be something that they will need more support and coaching around leaving and then returning from their paternity leave too. The challenge for all businesses, in my opinion, is because there's no silver bullet, it's incredibly complex. And what that means is undertaking a number of initiatives, everything from unconscious bias training, which we've rolled out across the whole business as mandatory, through to really thinking about recruitment and building pipeline. My view is that I don't believe in quotas, but I really do believe in over-indexing on pipeline to ensure that there's a really balanced pipeline of candidates for each role. And then I've already mentioned stretch and training for women and building confidence and providing kind of practical recommendations through to the inclusive leadership side of things. So there's a whole range of initiatives that companies need to think about, and it's not easy, and it's it will take businesses years to really address the balance, but we've got to start now. And I think having two daughters for the future of my children, and making sure that that companies make up look very different than they do now.